The goddess of war spares me. The battle was already lost. Jack Carter lay on the cold, cracked ground, his rifle empty, his body aching. Smoke filled the air, mixing with the sharp metallic scent of blood. The human outpost had been completely destroyed. Flames flickered in the ruins of the command center, and the bodies of his fallen comrades lay scattered around him. He was the last one left. Above him, towering like a goddess of death, stood High Queen Varexa of the Xilari Empire. She was massive, almost 7 feet tall, her silver armor shining even through the dust and fire. Her helmet had sharp, blade-like edges, and her long, deep purple cape barely moved in the heat of battle. Her piercing, golden eyes stared down at Jack through her helmet's visor. In her clawed hands, she held a massive, curved sword, still dripping with the blood of his people. Jack's breath was ragged. He tried to move, but his body refused. His left leg was broken, and a deep cut on his arm burned like fire. He had fought as hard as he could. He had tried to protect his team, but the Xilari were too strong. And now, it was over. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, accepting his fate. She would kill him. That was the way of the Xilari. They never left survivors. Their empire was built on conquest, and their warriors respected only strength. A human like him, broken and defeated, was nothing to them. A metallic sound made him open his eyes. Varexa had raised her sword. Jack met her gaze. If he was going to die, he would die looking his enemy in the eyes. Varexa hesitated. Jack saw it, just for a second. The slight shift of her stance, the way her fingers tightened around the hilt of her sword. It was not hesitation from weakness. It was something else. Confusion. No. Curiosity. The sword hovered inches from his throat. Jack's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He waited for the final strike, but it never came. Instead, Varexa did something no one could have expected. She lowered her weapon. Jack blinked in shock. He barely understood what he was seeing. She was sparing him. The other Xilari warriors, standing nearby, murmured in confusion. They had seen it too. Their warlord had never spared a human before. Varexa turned her head slightly, her golden eyes scanning Jack's face as if searching for something. Then she spoke. "You are different." Her voice was deep and smooth, like a blade sliding against stone. Jack's throat was dry. He wanted to speak, to demand an answer, but the words wouldn't come. Varexa stepped back, still watching him. Then she turned to her warriors. "Leave him." The Xilari hesitated. Leave him? Their High Queen had just wiped out every other human on the battlefield, but now she was sparing this one. A Xilari commander, a heavily armored warrior with deep red markings on his armor, stepped forward. "My queen, he is a human. He must die." Varexa didn't move. Her expression was unreadable. Then, without a word, she snapped her fingers. The red-marked commander's head exploded. The Xilari soldiers immediately stepped back in fear. A chilling silence followed. Jack felt his stomach twist. The pure, effortless power of this alien warlord was terrifying. She had just executed one of her own elite warriors without even looking at him. Varexa turned back to Jack, her golden eyes burning into his. "You live because I allow it." Her voice was cold, final. "Do not waste this gift, human." Then she walked away. Jack watched as the Xilari warlord and her army left the battlefield, leaving him behind. He should have been relieved. He should have been grateful. But all he felt was confusion. Why had she spared him? As he lay there, staring at the dark sky above, a single terrifying thought crept into his mind. Varexa hadn't just let him live. She had chosen him, and whatever that meant, he knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. "She's following me. Everywhere." Jack Carter should have been dead. Instead, he was back at Outpost Echo, a secret human base hidden deep inside an asteroid belt. His wounds had healed, and he was fit for duty again. But no matter how much he tried to move on, One question refused to leave his mind. Why did she spare me? The image of High Queen Virexa lowering her sword haunted him. He had seen her slaughter an entire battalion of his people without a second thought, yet when it came to him, she had hesitated. And worse, she had let him live. Jack tried to push it away, tried to tell himself it didn't matter. The war wasn't over. Humanity still had a fighting chance. That's what mattered. But then, the strange things started happening. The battles that should have killed me. Jack was a soldier. He didn't get to rest for long. Just a week after he was cleared for duty, his squad was sent on a dangerous mission. Sabotage an auxiliary supply convoy in deep space. It should have been an even fight. 2 small human strike teams against a lightly guarded auxiliary shipment. Fast, clean, in and out. But the mission went wrong immediately. As soon as they jumped into the system, auxiliary warships were waiting. It was an ambush. Pull back. Pull back, Jack's commander shouted over the comms. Explosions rocked the ship as laser fire tore through the human squadron. Jack's fighter shook violently as warning lights flashed red. They were outgunned, outnumbered. There was no way they were getting out alive. Then something impossible happened. The enemy stopped firing. Jack barely had time to process it before he heard the voice of his commander again. What the hell? The auxiliary. They're disengaging. Jack looked at his radar. The auxiliary ships were holding back. They still had the advantage, but for some reason, they weren't finishing the job. They weren't targeting him. His squad barely made it out alive. Jack sat in the debriefing room, staring at the wall. It didn't make sense. Auxiliary never showed mercy, so why had they let him escape? The nightmares that felt too real. The dreams started a few nights later. At first, they were just flashes, glimpses of golden eyes watching him from the darkness. He would wake up drenched in sweat, his pulse racing. Then, the dreams became clearer. He saw her, Virexa, standing in a dark, empty space, her silver armor reflecting an unseen light. She didn't speak. She just stared at him, like she was studying him. But the worst part, it didn't feel like a dream. Jack had been through enough war to know when his mind was playing tricks on him. This felt different, like she was really there, watching, waiting. Then I saw her, in real life. Jack tried to shake it off. He had a job to do, another mission, another battle. This time, he was assigned to defend a human colony under siege. Auxiliary ground troops had landed, overwhelming the settlement's defenses. Jack and his team were sent in to evacuate survivors and push back the enemy. As soon as he hit the ground, the battlefield was chaos. Laser fire rained from above. The colony's buildings were in ruins. Human soldiers fought desperately, trying to hold the line. Jack took cover behind a collapsed wall, firing at the advancing auxiliary. Then he saw her. Not on a screen, not in a dream. She was really there. Virexa stood on a ridge overlooking the battlefield, her long purple cape flowing behind her. She wasn't wearing her full helmet this time. Her face was visible. Sharp features, golden eyes glowing like embers. Jack froze. She was watching him. Not the battle. Him. The moment their eyes met, a shiver ran down his spine. Virexa raised her hand. Jack tensed, expecting a death command, expecting her forces to charge him. But instead, she signaled them to stop. Jack's heart pounded. The auxiliary stopped attacking in his sector. They were letting him live. Again. Jack's radio crackled. Carter, what the hell is going on? The auxiliary aren't pressing their attack. It's like they're holding back. Jack swallowed hard, gripping his weapon. This wasn't normal. This wasn't war. This was something else. She's not just letting me live. She's protecting me. After the battle, the whispers started. Jack had survived 2 battles now. Both times, he should have died. Both times, auxiliary forces had let him go. His fellow soldiers noticed. "Hey Carter, how come you always get lucky? I heard the Xilari don't even target your squad." That true. The rumors spread. Some soldiers thought he was a spy. Others thought he had made some kind of deal with the Xilari. Jack couldn't blame them. Because the truth was even worse. Virexa wasn't just letting him live. She was following him. And now he had no idea what she wanted. Final scene. The message that changed everything. Jack tried to ignore it. He tried to go back to his normal routine. Then, one night, his ship's computer beeped. A private transmission. Unknown origin. No ID. No traceable source. He hesitated. Then, slowly, he opened the message. A single line appeared on the screen. "You cannot run from me, Jack Carter." Jack's blood turned to ice. Then, another line appeared. "I let you live. Now, I will not leave you alone." Jack clenched his fists. This wasn't a game. The most powerful warlord in the galaxy had chosen him, and no matter where he ran, she would always find him. A goddess in my room. Jack Carter didn't scare easily. He had survived battles that should have killed him. He had watched entire cities burn under the Xilari's brutal invasions. He had lost friends, comrades, everything. But tonight, he was afraid. The message still glowed on his screen. "You cannot run from me, Jack Carter. I let you live. Now, I will not leave you alone." High Queen Virexa had been following him, watching him, protecting him in battles. And now she was making contact. Jack's pulse pounded in his ears. His fingers hovered over the console. He should report this. He should alert command. But some part of him already knew the truth. There was no point. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't a glitch in the system. This was her. And she had finally decided to let him know. The feeling of being watched. Jack shut off the message and pushed away from his desk. His quarters on Outpost Echo were small. Just a bunk, a metal table, and a weapons locker. Barely enough space to breathe. But right now, it felt suffocating. He needed air. Grabbing his jacket, he stepped into the dimly lit corridor. The base was quiet. Most of the soldiers were asleep, exhausted from battle drills. Jack walked down the hall, his boots echoing off the metal floor. He didn't know where he was going. He just needed to move. But even as he walked, he felt it. That same eerie sensation that had haunted him for weeks. He was being watched. His instincts screamed at him. Every soldier knew this feeling. The weight of unseen eyes, the prickling on the back of the neck. In the field, it meant a sniper had you in their sights. In battle, it meant death was seconds away. Jack turned sharply. Nothing. The corridor was empty. His hand twitched toward his sidearm. He wasn't paranoid. Something was wrong. Taking a deep breath, he forced himself to relax. Maybe he was losing it. Maybe the war was finally getting to him. He started walking back to his room. Then, his door slid open on its own. Jack froze. That was impossible. His room was secured. No one else had access. The doors didn't just open unless someone was inside. Jack reached for his gun. Slowly, carefully, he stepped inside and stopped. She was there, sitting on his bunk. Virexa. Jack's breath caught in his throat. She wasn't wearing her full armor. Her silver chestplate was gone, replaced by a dark, sleeveless battle suit that clung to her form like living shadow. Her long purple cape draped over the edge of his bed, barely touching the floor. Her golden eyes gleamed in the dim light, locked onto him. Jack's grip tightened on his pistol. "How the hell did you get in here?" His voice was steady, but his pulse was racing. Virexa didn't move, didn't blink. Then she smirked. "You are surprised." Jack scowled. "You broke into a human military outpost." "I walked in," she corrected. "No one stopped me." That sent a cold shiver down Jack's spine. No alarms, no alerts, no gunfire. She was telling the truth. She had just walked in, and no one had even noticed. Jack kept his weapon raised. "What do you want?" Virexa leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. She was too calm, too confident. "You." Jack's fingers twitched. "Not happening." Virexa let out a quiet, amused hum. "You do not even know what I mean." Jack swallowed. He needed to stay in control. He needed to think. "You've been following me," he said. "Why? What's your game?" Virexa tilted her head slightly. "I have been observing you." "No kidding." Her golden eyes flickered, as if amused by his defiance. "You are different. Your kind is weak, but you are not. You survived battles where you should have died. You stand unbroken, even in the face of death. That is rare." Jack clenched his jaw. "That's called luck." "No," Virexa said, standing up. "That is why I chose you." Jack took a step back. His gun was still pointed at her, but she didn't even care. "Chose me for what?" he demanded. Virexa smiled. It was a small, knowing smile, one that sent a dangerous chill through him. She took a slow step toward him. Jack's back hit the wall. He hadn't even realized he was retreating. Virexa reached out. Her fingers brushed his jaw. Jack flinched. Her touch was warm. Unreal. "I spared you," she said softly, "because I saw something in you I have never seen in any human before." Jack forced himself to stay still. "And what's that?" Her golden eyes bore into his. "A match." Jack's breath hitched. His mind screamed at him to shove her away, to run, to do something. But he didn't move. Virexa slowly pulled back, watching him with something that almost looked like amusement. "You fear me," she said. Jack exhaled sharply. Only an idiot wouldn't. Virexa's smirk widened. "Good. Fear is useful." Jack gritted his teeth. "Are you here to kill me?" "No." He narrowed his eyes. "Then what do you want?" Virexa studied him for a long moment. Then she leaned in, too close. Close enough that Jack could see the faint scars on her skin, the battle-worn marks that made her more than just an alien warlord. A warrior. A conqueror. And something else entirely. "I want to see what you do next." Jack's stomach twisted. "What the hell does that mean?" Virexa chuckled. It was the most unsettling sound Jack had ever heard. Then, without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. Jack barely had time to process it. "That's it." Virexa paused at the threshold. She glanced over her shoulder, her golden eyes burning. "For now." The door slid shut behind her. Jack released a breath he didn't know he had been holding. His heart was hammering. His mind was racing. She had broken into his room. She had stood inches from him. She had touched him. And worst of all, she was toying with him. Jack ran a hand down his face. He needed a plan. Fast. Because one thing was now painfully clear. Virexa wasn't just following him. She wasn't going to stop. The truth about her obsession. Jack Carter had spent years in war, but this was the first time he felt truly hunted. Not by an army. Not by a sniper hidden in the shadows. By her. By High Queen Virexa of the Xelari Empire. She had broken into his base. She had stood inches from him. She had touched his face and told him he was a match. And then she had just left. That was the worst part. She was toying with him. Jack didn't sleep that night. How could he? Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined her standing at the foot of his bed, watching him with those golden, predatory eyes. She was playing a long game, and Jack was running out of time to figure out why. Orders from command. The next morning, Jack was called into the command center. The senior officers sat around the circular war table, the holographic map of the galaxy flickering between battle zones. The atmosphere was tense. "We need to talk about you, Carter," said Captain Holloway, a grizzled veteran with cybernetic implants running down one side of his face. Jack straightened. Here we go. You've survived multiple encounters with the auxiliary, Holloway continued, in situations where you should have been dead. Jack said nothing. The auxiliary aren't targeting you. The words hung in the air like a noose tightening around Jack's throat. They've ignored you in battle. They've ignored your squad. Hell, we ran scans, and their ships literally adjust their targeting algorithms to avoid you. Holloway's cybernetic eye glowed as he studied Jack. You want to explain that? Jack kept his face blank. No idea, sir. A long silence followed. Then, a younger officer leaned forward. Are you working with them? Jack's fingers twitched. He wanted to punch that guy in the face. Instead, he kept his voice calm. You really think I'd betray humanity? Then why do they keep letting you live? Jack clenched his jaw. He didn't have an answer. Finally, Holloway sighed. For now, you're still a soldier. But keep this in mind, Carter. If we find out you're compromised, we will not hesitate to end you. Jack gave a sharp nod. Understood, sir. The meeting ended, but Jack knew something had changed. His own people were starting to doubt him. And worse, he couldn't blame them. The confrontation. Jack needed answers, and he knew where to get them. He stole a small reconnaissance ship from a hangar and set a course into deep space, away from human-controlled sectors. He had a feeling he wouldn't have to wait long. And he was right. Within an hour, an auxiliary warship dropped out of hyperspace right in front of him. Jack gritted his teeth. Come on, you alien psycho. Show yourself. The auxiliary ship didn't fire, didn't hail him. It just sat there. Then his ship's systems shut down. Every control panel, every light. Jack's stomach dropped. And then she was there. A flicker of golden energy. A distortion of space itself. Virexa materialized right in front of him. Jack scrambled back, reaching for his weapon. But it wasn't there. Virexa smirked, twirling his gun between her fingers before tossing it aside like a toy. You do not need that. Jack's pulse hammered in his ears. You're pulling some real stalker-level shit, you know that. Virexa chuckled. Stalker. She tilted her head, as if tasting the word. I prefer the term. Observer. Jack glared at her. So, what am I? Some pet project? An experiment? Virexa took a slow step forward. You are a question. Jack swallowed. A question. Virexa's golden eyes glowed. You defy logic. Humans are weak. Soft. They break. She reached out, and Jack flinched. But she only hovered her fingers near his temple. Yet you do not. I have seen you survive what no human should. I have seen you fight beyond reason. I have seen you look death in the face, and refuse to bow. Her voice dropped lower. You fascinate me. Jack exhaled sharply. He needed to take control of this conversation. You spared me, he said. Why? Virexa smiled. Because you are worthy. Jack felt a chill. Worthy of what? She leaned in, her breath warm against his skin. Of me. Jack's entire body tensed. What the hell was she saying? He forced out a shaky laugh. Oh, that's rich. You're a warlord. I'm a soldier. Our people are at war. What, you think this is some kind of twisted romance? Virexa's smirk widened. Do you fear that possibility? Jack scowled. No. I fear that you're insane. Virexa let out a low, amused hum. Perhaps, but power does not require sanity. Jack took a step back, trying to keep his breathing steady. What's your endgame, Virexa? Why me? Her expression shifted, just slightly. And for the first time, Jack saw something behind her golden eyes. Not just curiosity, not just arrogance. Something deeper, something almost human. Then her usual confidence returned. She straightened, looking down at him with the same unreadable expression. I have spent my life conquering, ruling, winning. She stepped back, her golden eyes burning into his. You are the first thing I could not conquer. Jack felt his chest tighten. For the first time since this nightmare began, he finally understood. This wasn't just obsession. This was defeat. Virexa had ruled over countless species. She had bent entire empires to her will. And yet, she had let him go. She had given him a choice, and he had denied her. Now she wanted to understand why. Jack ran a hand through his hair. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not some puzzle for you to solve. Virexa watched him. Then she smiled. We shall see. Jack's ship powered back on. The lights flickered, the controls unlocked. Virexa took one step back and vanished. Jack sagged against the console, breathing heavily. His hands were shaking. He had just looked a war goddess in the eye and told her no. But the worst part, he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep saying it. My worst nightmare. She's protecting me. Jack Carter had spent his entire life fighting to survive. But now, he wasn't just surviving. He was being protected. And that terrified him more than any battle ever had. The mission that should have killed me. 2 weeks had passed since his last encounter with Virexa, the alien warlord who had turned his life into a twisted game of cat and mouse. Jack had tried to focus on his job. He was a soldier after all. The war wasn't going to stop just because one Silari war goddess had decided he was her personal fascination. So when command assigned him to a high-risk mission, he jumped at the chance. Objective: destroy a Silari supply depot deep in enemy-controlled space. Team: 7 elite operatives, trained for infiltration. Risk level: suicide. Jack didn't care. He needed to prove himself. To his commanders, to his squad, to himself. But from the moment they entered the system, things started going wrong. Their cloaking systems malfunctioned. The enemy fleet was already waiting for them. Within seconds, half of Jack's team was wiped out. The remaining 3, including Jack, had no choice but to crash land on the depot's surface. Jack hit the ground hard, rolling as his pod exploded behind him. He barely had time to get his bearings before laser fire rained down from above. A dozen Silari warriors stormed toward him, weapons raised. Jack gritted his teeth, gripping his rifle. No way out. This was it. Then, everything changed. A deafening sonic boom split the sky. Jack's attackers suddenly stopped. He frowned, gun still raised. Why weren't they shooting? Then he saw her. Virexa. Descending from above, her silver and black armor reflecting the flames of battle. She landed between him and the auxiliary soldiers, her golden eyes burning with something dangerously close to fury. She didn't even look at him. She looked at them. And then, she spoke. He is not to be touched. Jack's breath hitched. No, 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 no. The auxiliary warriors hesitated. But High Queen. Virexa didn't let him finish. With a flick of her wrist, a blade extended from her gauntlet, and in a blur, she cut him down. The rest of the auxiliary immediately fell to their knees. Jack could only watch in stunned horror as she turned to the survivors. Leave. Now. The soldiers ran. Jack's mind raced. What the hell? He stood frozen, his rifle still aimed at where the enemy had stood seconds ago. Then, slowly, Virexa turned to him. For the first time since she had appeared, her golden eyes met his. You were about to die. Jack clenched his fists. I was doing my job. Virexa raised an eyebrow. A job that would have killed you. Jack took a slow step back. So what? You're my guardian angel now. Virexa's smirk returned. No, Jack Carter. I am your goddess. You are mine, whether you accept it or not. Jack didn't even realize he was shaking until he tried to lower his weapon. Virexa had saved his life. Again. And that meant only one thing. She wasn't going to stop. You don't get to do this, he growled. You don't get to decide who lives and dies. Not for me. Virexa chuckled. But I already have. Jack forced himself to stand his ground. You can't just claim me like I'm a damn trophy. Varex's eyes gleamed. You misunderstand, human. You are not a trophy. You are a prize. Jack's heart pounded. There's a difference. Virexa stepped closer, too close. Trophies are taken. Prizes are won. Jack exhaled sharply. This isn't happening. This isn't real. He had faced death 100 times over. He had seen men and women burn, planets fall, entire fleets reduced to dust. But standing here, under the gaze of this alien warlord, he felt powerless in a way he never had before. Because she had chosen him, and she would not take no for an answer. Command doesn't trust me anymore. Jack barely made it back to human-controlled space. When he returned to Outpost Echo, the reaction was immediate. The whispers, the suspicion. He had been on a suicide mission, and he was the only one who survived. His commanders didn't say it outright, but he could see it in their eyes. They didn't trust him anymore. Captain Holloway's voice was cold. Explain to me why the High Queen of the Xilari herself appeared on that battlefield and saved your life. Jack sat stiffly in his chair. I don't know. The other officers exchanged glances. Bullshit. Jack gritted his teeth. What do you want me to say? That she's obsessed with me. That she thinks I'm some kind of chosen one. You wouldn't believe me even if I told you the truth. Holloway leaned forward. Are you compromised, Carter? Jack's jaw tightened. No. But even as he said it, he felt a sick twist of doubt in his gut. Wasn't he? Hadn't Virexa already changed his life forever? Hadn't she already claimed him? The final warning. That night, Jack sat alone in his quarters, staring at his reflection in the small mirror. He looked the same. Same scars, same haunted eyes, same soldier. So why did he feel like someone completely different? His console beeped. Another message. Untraceable. Jack already knew who it was from. Slowly, he opened it. You cannot fight fate, Jack Carter. Jack exhaled shakily. Then, another line appeared. Soon, you will understand. Jack's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He wanted to respond, to fight back, to tell her she was wrong. But he didn't. Because deep down, some part of him feared she was right. The ultimate choice, humanity or her. Jack Carter had spent his entire life fighting against the Xilari. Now, for the first time, he wasn't sure who his real enemy was. Branded a traitor, they put him in a cell. The same commanders he had bullied for. The same leaders who had sent him on suicidal missions. The same people who had once called him a hero. Now, they saw him as a threat. Captain Holloway stood outside the reinforced glass, arms crossed. His mechanical eye whirred as it scanned Jack. You should have died on that mission. Jack scoffed, leaning back against the cold metal bench. Yeah, I've heard that before. Holloway wasn't amused. You're the only survivor. Again. Xilari forces pulled back the second you hit the battlefield. And now we have reports that their High Queen personally intervened to save your ass. Jack stayed silent. Holloway took a step closer. What are you to her, Carter? Jack looked him dead in the eye. A problem. Holloway sighed, rubbing his temple. I don't know if you're a spy, a puppet, or just unlucky as hell. But I'll tell you this. If I get even a whiff of betrayal, I will end you. Jack's lips twitched. Good to know where we stand. Holloway gave him one last, searching look, then turned and walked out. Jack exhaled slowly, closing his eyes. They didn't trust him. They never would again. And maybe they were right. The inescapable visitor. The cell was dark and silent. Hours passed. Jack sat still, staring at the floor, lost in his own thoughts. Then, a faint hum filled the air. Jack's head snapped up. A golden distortion rippled in the center of his cell. The temperature dropped as the air shimmered like a mirage. Jack shot to his feet. No, not here. Not now. The shadows deepened, and then she stepped through. Virexa. Her silver-black armor gleamed under the dim light, her golden eyes burning with an intensity Jack had come to fear. Her long, dark cape trailed behind her as she stood tall, commanding, otherworldly. Jack's fists clenched. "You have got to be kidding me." Virexa smirked. "I rarely jest." Jack took a step back. "What the hell are you doing here?" She tilted her head. "Rescuing you." Jack laughed bitterly. "You think I need rescuing?" Virexa's gaze swept over the reinforced walls, the security cameras, the energy locks. "You are caged. Your people no longer trust you, and you do not belong here." Jack shook his head. "I'm not going with you." Virexa sighed as if he were being difficult. "You say that as if you have a choice." Jack's muscles tensed. Fight or run. He didn't like either option. But then, before he could move, Virexa snapped her fingers. A deafening boom shook the base. Jack stumbled as the walls trembled. Emergency sirens blared. Red lights flashed. The faint echoes of gunfire rang out from beyond the hallway. Virexa took a step forward, her presence overwhelming. "I will not ask again." Jack's breath came fast and shallow. "You're attacking the base." Virexa gave a slow, knowing smile. "I am retrieving what is mine." Jack felt his blood turn to ice. "No," he said firmly. "I am not yours." Something flickered in Virexa's gaze. Amusement, frustration, and then something else. Something raw. She reached out, brushing her fingers against his jaw, just as she had before. But this time, her touch was different, gentler. "You will be," she whispered. Jack yanked away. "You're insane." Virexa exhaled slowly. "Perhaps." Then, with a flick of her wrist, the cell door unlocked. The alarms grew louder. Human soldiers were coming. Jack knew he had only seconds to decide. Virexa extended a hand. "Come with me, Jack Carter. The war is already over. Be at my side, or be forgotten." Jack's pulse pounded. This was it. His final choice. A future with her, or against her. Jack's mind raced. If he went with Virexa, he would become the very thing he had spent years fighting against. His people would see him as a traitor, a coward. But if he stayed, he would rot in this cell. His own commanders didn't trust him. He had no future in the human military. No future at all. And worst of all, Virexa would never stop. She had chosen him, and no matter what he did, she would always find him again. Jack clenched his fists. "Think, Carter. Think." Virexa's golden eyes studied him, waiting, expecting. She had power beyond anything he could comprehend. If he walked away now, he would never get another chance to understand her, to stop her, or to change her. Jack exhaled sharply. Then he grabbed her hand. Virexa's smirk widened in triumph. The world around them vanished. A flash of golden energy, a rush of wind. The sirens and gunfire melted away, and when Jack opened his eyes, they were no longer on the base, the throne of a conqueror. Jack staggered. The floor beneath him was smooth black stone, cold, unfamiliar. He looked up. They were in a vast, open chamber. Tall obsidian pillars stretched toward a ceiling carved with ancient war symbols. Massive banners of the Siluri Empire draped the walls. At the center of it all sat a throne. Virexa's throne. Jack took a slow, shaky breath. What the hell did I just do? Virexa stepped past him, ascending the throne with effortless grace. She turned, sitting, her golden eyes gleaming as she rested her chin on her fist. "You have chosen, Jack Carter." Jack swallowed hard. He had made a deal with the devil. And now, he wasn't sure if he wanted to escape her anymore. The price of her obsession. Jack Carter had always fought for humanity. Now, he sat in the heart of the enemy's empire, standing before a throne built on the bones of conquered worlds. And for the first time in his life, He wasn't sure who he was fighting for anymore. The Warlord's prize. The throne room of the Xilari High Queen was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. The walls stretched endlessly, lined with the banners of defeated empires. Massive crystalline statues of Xilari warlords stood like silent sentinels, carved into postures of victory and domination. And at the very center, seated upon a towering obsidian throne, was her, Virexa. She rested one arm against the side of the throne, golden eyes glowing as they devoured him. Jack stood in front of her, his pulse hammering in his ears. He had made the choice. He had taken her hand. Now he had to live with it. Virexa's lips curled into a smirk. You look like a man who was regretting his decisions. Jack swallowed hard. Maybe. Virexa chuckled softly. You will come to understand, Jack Carter. There is no place for you among your people. They would have let you rot in that cell. Jack's jaw clenched. She wasn't wrong. But that didn't mean he belonged here. You didn't bring me here to talk, he said. So why don't you tell me what you really want? Virexa stood. She descended the steps slowly, her presence overwhelming, her cape flowing behind her like liquid shadow. What I want, she said, is for you to see the truth. Jack held his ground as she reached him, standing too close. The war is over, Virexa said. Your leaders simply do not realize it yet. Jack's stomach twisted. That's not true. Virexa raised a single hand. A golden holographic display flickered to life. Jack's breath caught in his throat. It was a live feed of Earth. Xilari warships hung in orbit, hundreds of them, their sleek black hulls reflecting the distant glow of the sun. At any moment, they could wipe out entire cities. Virexa leaned in, her voice a whisper against his ear. I could end them, Jack. In an instant. Jack's fists clenched. But I will not. He turned to her sharply. Why? Virexa smiled. Because you are here. Jack's mind raced. She wasn't attacking because of him. She was holding back an entire invasion. For him. The High Queen's proposal. Virexa waved a hand, and the image of Earth disappeared. She circled Jack slowly, her golden eyes never leaving him. You have a choice, she said. Join me. Stand at my side. I will spare your people. I will allow them to live, to rebuild, to exist beneath my rule. Jack's breath came fast and shallow. Beneath her rule. She wasn't offering peace. She was offering conquest with conditions. And if I say no? Jack asked. Virexa's expression darkened. Then I will remind your people what it means to defy me. Jack felt the weight of the moment. She wasn't bluffing. He had seen what she could do, what she had already done to countless worlds before. If he walked away, Earth would burn. The realization that changed everything. Jack inhaled sharply, his mind racing. This wasn't just obsession. This wasn't just her being fixated on him. She had given him something no one else in the galaxy had ever been given. A choice. Virexa had never spared an enemy before, never offered a place beside her throne. And she wasn't doing it out of weakness. She was doing it because, somewhere, deep down, she needed him. Jack's throat went dry. You don't just want me to join you, he said slowly. Virexa's gaze sharpened. You want me to believe in you. A flicker of something dangerous crossed her face, something almost human. She didn't confirm it. She didn't deny it. And that was all the proof Jack needed. For all her power, for all her ruthlessness, she had never had anyone stand beside her as an equal. Jack exhaled slowly. You think you've won. Virexa smirked. Have I not? Jack met her gaze. Then he did the one thing she didn't expect. He smiled. Virexa frowned slightly. Why do you look amused? Jack shrugged. Because you're not as different from humans as you think. Virexa stiffened. Jack took a slow step forward. This time, she was the one who took a step back. And that was when Jack knew. She had never feared anyone before. But now, she feared him. Not because of his strength, not because of his defiance, but because he saw her. Not just the warlord, not just the goddess, but the person underneath. The final choice. Jack exhaled, forcing himself to stay calm. "Let Earth go," he said. "Prove to me that you don't need to rule over everything to be strong." Varexa's golden eyes locked onto his. A long, tense silence followed. Then, without a word, she turned away. With a flick of her wrist, a series of glowing glyphs appeared on the air before her. The auxiliary fleet vanished from Earth's orbit. Jack's knees almost buckled from relief. She had done it. She had let them go. Varexa turned back to him, her face unreadable. "Do not mistake this for weakness." Jack nodded. "I don't." He hesitated. Then he stepped closer. For the first time, she didn't stop him. Jack met her gaze. "You could have killed me 100 times over," he said. "You didn't." Varexa said nothing. Jack smirked. "Maybe I'm not the only one who's been conquered." Varexa's lips parted. Then she laughed. A real, genuine laugh. Jack had no idea what the future held. No idea what he had just started. But one thing was clear. This war wasn't over. It was just beginning.